Kia ora everyone, and welcome along to our council meeting on the 10th of June 2020. We'll start with the council affirmation. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities. We will. In the council karakia, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina ki ngā kiuta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he hio, he huka, he hohu, ti hei, mauri ora. Please take a seat. I think we're all present for today. There's no apologies. Is there any identification of extraordinary business anyone has? Yes, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Given the recent decision by NZTA not to keep the state highways open during snow events, I believe this is an event of recent occurrence that has an impact on some of our communities that we should discuss this afternoon.
Great. I'll address that during my report to council. Are there any conflicts of interest not on the interest register that you'd like to identify today? None, and we don't have any public forums. The first item of business is the minutes of the ordinary meeting from the 27th of May. Was someone willing to move that they're true and correct? Lyle and Alexander. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Current matters requiring attention. We have the implementation of district-wide rates, which is due for a 10th of June report back. It's in here, section 17A, review of delivery services today. Solar panels and indoor courts, 24th of June, and chlorination report for Arthur's Pass and Upper Selwyn Huts on the 8th of July. So the next report is my report, which is just verbal today. And I'll start with the matter that Councillor Alexander has raised. The Arthur's Pass and Castle Hill communities have been upset at changes that NZTA have made to the management of the passes particularly, and what that means for travel to and from Castle Hill and Arthur's Pass to the plains, or right from the west coast through to Canterbury. And this affects not only school children to and from school or people working, it's also impacts on emergencies and medical, the medical profession as well. So having been made aware of how the corridor was handled over the last couple of years, and we've facilitated meetings with NZTA in the past. It's an NZTA corridor, it's their decision around how that's handled. So I am facilitating a meeting with NZTA and the contractor on Wednesday next week. And the local councillors and community board have been invited to come, as well as representatives from the community committees up there and any resident that would like to be a part of that. It'll be a briefing from NZTA on how they plan to manage that corridor through the winter. It's particularly the heavy snowfall events that are the issue. So it'll be their meeting to communicate what's going on and to ask questions and answers. My role and our role as council is to support the community and facilitate those to happen. It's not our decision around what happens with the state highway, but we do have a role with the local roads that go on up there, and that is within the townships, as well as one or two other roads that link to the state highway. So we just need to make sure that we're on the same page with how things are managed, even between the passes as well. So, Councillor Alexander.
Yeah, because it's not only the roads; it's the other potential impact is our management of our facilities there. If NZTA closed the road because it's snowing or has snow on the roads, then how are our contractors going to maintain the facilities like water and wastewater at Arthur's Pass, Castle Hill and or Lake Coleridge potentially in an event that they fail at that time, short of getting a helicopter in, which in a snow event might be also problematical. It leaves us in a challenging situation where we're responsible for the facilities but cannot get to a place to maintain them.
Yep, I'll make it the Chief Executive to answer that, but when we were building and designing these facilities, we know the environment that they've been built in and the capabilities that they need to withstand. It's an alpine environment with extreme temperatures, and so that has been taken into consideration. But
I can't add to those comments, Mr. Mayor.
cool, thank you. There's a number of other matters that have come up, which I'll just touch on. Firstly, the annual plan process that we've been going through. Received 237 submissions. Last week we had hearings on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it was great to have people come and tell us face to face exactly what has been going on for them and where they think council should be leading in the next over the next 12 months with our budgets and projects. Tomorrow we have deliberations, and the decisions will be discussed then for formal ratification at the June 24th meeting of council. So just a reminder to all councillors that if there are any further questions that you have around making decisions tomorrow, please make the CEO aware of those today and myself, so that we can make sure that there's answers available to you rather than having to struggle through finding them at 30 seconds notice tomorrow. And I haven't received too many questions. You've had a week to ask those, so please make sure that you ask them by the end of today as you become aware of them. The Provincial Growth Fund has been a space that obviously a lot of New Zealand pre-COVID was quite concerned about attracting funding to their region and to the area. Canterbury and Selwyn was not a surge region, but in light of COVID, there's been a bit of a change in the way that the government has wanted to allocate funding out of the Provincial Growth Fund. And I've just become aware today of fencing of waterways, expressions of interest that the PGF is looking for immediate job creation with a time frame for construction activity and a degree of visibility to the community. And to be eligible, there needs to be a well-established, strong governance of the project. You've got to be able to sign a legal contract, which we are. Have support of relevant regional councils or Department of Conservation. Have credible work plans, be able to show or articulate a catchment plan. Create jobs for people that have been affected by COVID-19. Demonstrate experience and engagement with Māori and the wider community, recognise the social and cultural outcomes, and it's got to be of benefit to multiple landowners. So I guess I'm letting you know that that's there, but also that there's a bit of a change in focus for the Provincial Growth Fund, and it's not just on the previous, along the previous lines, but there is certainly a sense of urgency around government wanting information. And I know that this week our staff have been working hard around halls and historic buildings to try and get information to the government. Last time for shovel-ready projects, it was 10 days over Easter. Not a great time to be able to ensure that a best proposal was put forward, but we did very well given the circumstances. Unfortunately, these application times continue to be on really short timeframes. So, David, thank you to you and your team. And Douglas, I understand you're doing a lot in the hall space for what's going on there. And if there is new opportunities for provincial growth funds continue to come to us, we need to make sure that we're looking at them in conjunction with our partners, because they're not necessarily just going to be Selwyn District Council matters. The Te Wahorako governors met on Friday last week, and there will be a presentation brought to this council around a new agreement, and that'll happen over the next couple of months. So just a heads up that that is coming to us for a future meeting. Councillor Training, there was an essential series put out by Equip, which is a subset of local government in New Zealand. I think there's 10 sessions in that. And speaking with the new councillors last week, we determined that we would try and hold those together. You're welcome to access them anytime, but actually watching them together means that there's an opportunity for some discussion. So at 8 o'clock on Wednesday mornings, one per fortnight or every 3 weeks would happen in the councillors' room. And if anyone would like to be a part of those, Bernie will be scheduling them, and they'll appear in your diaries. But certainly encourage, particularly new councillors, anyone who wants a refresh on just some high-level governance 101 matters to attend those. And David, I'm not sure if you're going to touch on the use of this building during elections, but I just thought I'd mention that, as in previous years, this building will be used for the general elections this year, and that it happens over a couple of weeks as special votes can be put, and advance voting can happen, and that will be in the room next door to the council chambers here. So it will mean that during our meetings, both rooms next door will be off limits to us, and we'll have alternative arrangements.
Yeah, look, I think it impacts on one meeting only, so, and we will work our way around that. In fact, we might even consider taking that meeting out to Timetable or maybe back to Lincoln.
Great. And lastly, the Canterbury Mural Forum is meeting on Friday this week. The main focus of that is around climate change, and Dr. Rod Carr is presenting to the group, and any papers that he presents I'll be bringing back to this group for further discussion and for your information too. That's my verbal report to you. Councillor Hassan.
Yes, thanks. My interest is around the fencing of waterways. If we are looking to be partnering with projects, can I suggest that you build on the work that Living Waters and Fish and Game have already done in our land drainage catchments, because that's very, very important, the work that they've pre-done. There's still some work to go. I know that they were relying on external funding to actually do those projects. So can I just suggest that we actually go and talk to those organisations as well?
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And it will be building on existing projects and relationships. I know that the Selwyn Wahora Zone Committee had a number of projects around fencing in your time there, and with Nicole there now. So it certainly won't be just our projects, but looking at what could be linked together to improve water quality in Selwyn through the fencing of waterways is something we should continue to advocate for. Thank you. I'll move that you receive my report. The seconder, Councillor Gallagher. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. The next item is on pages 18 through 57. That Council receives the financial report for the period 30th of April 2020 for information. Is there a mover? Councillor Alexander, seconded Mugford. Is there any discussion on the report? Greg, is there anything you'd like, Craig, anything you'd like to talk us through?
Yes, so I'll just run through, if you go to page 19 on the agenda, I'll just run through where we are at in terms of financial performance for the year to date.
Can you speak up a bit, Craig?
Oh, sorry, I'll sit so close to the microphone.
Thanks.
Is that better? Yeah. So this report covers the period from 1st of July 2019 to 30th April 2020, so a 10-month period. The overall message continues to be the same to previous financial reports. The council's in good financial position. With an operating surplus of $14.5 million compared to a budget of $8.6 million. It's important to note that this surplus is required to fund the council's capital expenditure program. It's not available to reduce rates. So if we just look at the subsidies and grants line on that page, you'll see that there is a favourable variance for subsidies and grants. That's largely to do with road maintenance expenditure being slightly ahead of budget, and the associated NZTA subsidy revenue we receive. Fees and charges is also ahead of budget due to the environmental services and facility revenue being ahead of the annual year-to-date budget. Interest revenue is ahead of budget largely due to high cash balances held, and also the timing of the capital expenditure causing this cash balance to be higher than anticipated. Dividend revenue in that same line is also ahead of budget, largely due to a additional dividend we received from Transwaste during the year. Sorry. So we're anticipating the full year dividend revenue to be slightly below budget just due to the timing of the Orion dividend. They've indicated that that dividend payment will fall in the next financial year. So just to be aware that this year's target won't be achieved, but it will just fall in sort of, they'll pay their dividend sort of July, August this year. So payments to staff underspent due to staff vacancies, payments to suppliers, overspent largely due to maintenance costs in terms of road maintenance, and also there is some additional costs due to the environmental services area. The operational projects that will be carried forward into the next financial year are looking to be about $3 million. That will also affect the variance. We jump down to expenditure in terms of finance costs. That is underspent due to lower interest rates and also due to the timing of the capital expenditure program. So we've had lower debt levels than we had originally anticipated. Development contributions revenue is ahead of budget due to the high activity level in the district. And the gross sales line is just to do with the iZone sale of land, so that's just slightly ahead of budget. Capital expenditure is year to date about $39 million behind budget, and that's just due to the timing of completing the capital expenditure program. Prior to the COVID-19 situation, we were looking like we were picking up in our capital expenditure program, but that's now been delayed slightly. So we're looking at carrying forward about $100 million into the 2021 financial year. So the overall message is that the council is in a good financial position.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Craig, for the explanation on this page. It's a great page and it's very clear. Unfortunately, it's not well understood, still not well understood by our ratepayers. Many of them who submitted on our annual plan saying you've got the surplus, why are you needing to increase rates? The challenge before each of us is to keep explaining that this is not, as the report says, this isn't cash in hand, this isn't money that can be used to reduce rates. It's kind of what I would call an accounting surplus versus a real cash in the hand surplus, to keep lifting the understanding in our community what this represents, because I don't believe there's a great deal of literacy around this.
Councillor Miller.
The only question I'd like clarity on is the finance costs. I guess when you've got 2.3 million budgeted and you've only spent 700K, essentially you've got a $1.6 million saving, which would have been funded from general rate. Surely that should be available for reducing our rating impost.
Yes, and so most of those projects are funded by either development contributions, targeted rates, or lease revenue in the case of the Health Hub. So most of them don't fall on the general rate, but any savings on things like the aquatic centre will be a benefit to that rating account.
I was pleased you explained the dividend thing, because that looked like that was certainly a place where I might have made some inroads on you. Craig, you passed the buck quite fast there, I saw.
Thank you. Are there any further questions through this report? Moved and seconded has happened already. So all those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Craig and Greg. Next we have Denise Kidd, update on the implementation of district-wide rates, and Kelsey. The recommendation is that council receives a summary of the operational implementation of the centralised online booking system, service level agreements and standardised fees and charges in relation to community centres and halls. Anyone willing to move that? Lyle, seconded. Reid. Kelsey, welcome. Just press the right hand button. Yep.
There we go. Is
Thank
that
you.
good?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've prepared the report for you today to update you on the progress of the standardisation of fees and charges and implementation of the standardised booking system. Happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
Any questions from Councillor Miller? Yes.
Well, it's not a question, it's a compliment, because we've always been accused of being inflexible and not listening to our ratepayers. But reading this report here, I see you have made major accommodations to try and make the system workable, which to me is listening to our ratepayers and trying to make the system work. So I think a big well done to you and your team. So good work.
Absolutely. Councillor Reid.
I'll second Grant's comments as well. Thanks, Kelsey. Just the question I've got is, so we've identified a number of halls and community centres that we've got the booking in place, but there's some that haven't been talked about, like lots of Green Park and Mead and others. Where are we at with them? Are they going to be included on the booking system as well?
Yes, so those centres are all on the showcase at the moment. Mead was requested by the property team to be removed because of the standards of the building. So they're all on the showcase and we'll be transitioning them all to bookable. It'll be starting with our staffed operationally managed centres, then to the centres that have service level agreements. Then we'll be working with the centres that have staff servicing the committee centres, and then it will be the remaining, so Green Park, which are solely committee managed.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes. I have a question re the Springston Hall. Given that they have combined the Hall Committee, the Reserve Committee and the Township Committee, should correspondence therefore be sent through to the Township Committee, seeing they've all actually been grouped as one. The Hall Committee is technically still in existence, but it is part of the combined Reserve, Township and now Hall Committee.
Okay. Just before we went into lockdown, the Springston Hall Committee handed over the bookings to the council. So we now operationally manage that centre. So I wasn't aware that they were all amalgamating into one. They sort of told me that nobody was restanding and handed over the bookings for council.
It's just that the bookings, I think you'll find, were taken by one of the committee members that live locally, but from reporting side of it, there still is a combined interest in the hall, but from the new committee structure.
Sure. So we can definitely include them. If they've all amalgamated, then they'll be included on any correspondence to do with the halls.
Kelsey, thank you. As a great report, as has already been said, just wondering, a lot of this work was around standardising fees and charges, also the experience that people have when they interact with a council facility, but allowing that level of local nuance to remain. There's been a lot of funding that council has put into these facilities and the rebuilds and the new builds. And just wondering how that has been reflected in a change of management with places, or whether traditional management of these facilities has remained, even though we've sort of moved into a new space of operation.
We're definitely moving forward with, I guess, the standardised online booking centre. So if one community group doesn't quite fit in one hall, or it's not quite the right rates for them, we're definitely trying to find the right option for them. So I guess that would be a new approach to how it's previously been managed with the community groups.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Anything further from councillors? No. All those in favour that we receive the report, say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Item number 4 is Murray England and Elaine McLaren, Assets Manager, Water Services and Water Service Delivery Manager. That the council receives the report on water services monthly update for information. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Lemon and Epihar. Murray and Elaine, welcome to the meeting. If you'd like to take us through your report, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Just before we start, I'd like to introduce again Elaine. You've seen her online, but now you get to see her in the real, in the flesh. So special welcome to Elaine. Elaine's our Water Service Delivery Manager here at Council. So the Water Service report starts on page 67, and we'll start off with Elaine. We're going to do a bit of a tag team as we go through it. Just to remind you, this is a monthly report, and we'll just be talking to the red text, which is the additions or changes from last time.
Yep. So we'll start with the potable water and the water safety plans that we're currently in the process of doing it. So during May, we submitted Rolleston, Darfield and West Melton water safety plans to the DHB for approval. And we're committed to submitting 10 further throughout June. Also in June, we have the DHB coming to assess the Rolleston water safety plan over 3 weeks, including site visits and a number of workshops. So we'll keep you updated with how that's going. Temporary chlorination, that's still happening in 2 locations, West Melton. So it's happening only at the Roslington Drive plant, and investigations have been underway to find out what the issue with the contamination at that plant has been. And that's been identified as the treated water storage reservoirs. It's therefore been recommended that the current storage reservoirs are replaced, or removed from service and then replaced, to allow the low dose chlorination to stop. So that's a programme of works that we're going through just now. We're in the process of getting a price to do those replacements, and we'll update you with how that's going. And in Dunsandel, that's also still under temporary low dose chlorination. Again, it's an issue with the treated water storage, though in this case it's the steel tank. We've had investigations works done by a third party, and they've now been completed, and we're considering what the options are going forward.
So I'll just add to that as well. And I think it's important to note that our acceptance of any contamination is a lot lower and a lot tighter than it ever has been. So in the past, where we've maybe allowed acted on E. coli. We're not actually now acting on total coliform, so we're responding a lot faster. And that's why we're sort of taking this hard line, which is the right thing to do. I'm moving down now. We're on page 68 to capacity for future growth in each township. So this is one of the matters that were brought up by council a couple of months ago for us to report back on. And in Appendix A, I have a table which is colour coded, which goes through all of our water supplies in the Selwyn district. Supplies highlighted green are ones where we've got no capacity constraints. Orange are where we have some constraints, and there's some matters for consideration before we allow new connections. And where the supplies are red or pink, that's where we have constraints which would stop or limit growth in those areas. Most of the areas where we have significant constraints are our rural water supplies. And I think that's probably due to the fact that they were built for a certain demand design at the time. The large extensive networks, which at the time you couldn't afford to oversize pipes dramatically because you're trying to get a cost-effective scheme in place. The water supplies are also taken from surface water, so consenting conditions are a lot more stringent on those as opposed to taking from groundwater. As staff, there's a couple of ways we're trying to resolve this. So there has been some requests for additional connections through subdivisions and some of the smaller townships on those rural supplies. Some of the ways we're dealing with it recently is by allowing some reallocation of units. So if a person has two properties, then they can transfer units from one property to the other. Or if it's a property that has 2 units and they're subdividing in half, they could have 1 unit in each of those 2 portions of the subdivision. Going forward, we're applying for a resource consent to transfer water from the Glen Tunnel water race intake, which takes about 250 litres a second, and transfer around about 3 litres a second of that, so quite an insignificant portion, up to our water supply intake, which is taking about 16 litres a second. So it's a significant increase to our water supply intake, but a very minor deficit on our water race intake. So that's one way of providing more capacity for that scheme. Part of the annual plan budget for next financial year, there's also a project of taking some of the Melbourne Hills scheme, a small portion of that, and adding that onto Darfield. So taking some of that demand off the Melbourne Hills scheme and moving it to a nearby scheme, which again will free up capacity. I think another option we can look at as a council would be to conduct a survey. We haven't asked our ratepayers, do you still want the number of units you have? And there may be some families who have reduced in size over time. Maybe there's a family now who have kids that left home, it's just a retiree couple. This is a situation that could be occurring. Do they still need 3 units? Do they now just need 1 unit? And there may be a way that they can reduce the number of units and save costs, but then also freeing up demand for other areas of the scheme. So that's so a number of ways we're looking at trying to provide more capacity in these areas. I think also that survey asking people if they want to relinquish units, it could be a good opportunity to ask farmers potentially, do they want more units? And that information can then be put in through the long-term plan to say, these are the growth projects we need to provide more capacity in those schemes going forward into the future. So that is that. I've got the topic of permanent chlorination, which starts at the bottom of page 68 and goes through to page 69. We're going to bring a report to the 6th of July council meeting, but I understand that there's a recess, so we'll probably push either to the end of that month or to the August meeting. So you're just going to have to hold fire on that. But the report will cover 3 main issues. The first, well, not issues, but 3 main matters. The first one is Upper Selwyn Hut's chlorination. So council has been consulting with the ratepayers at Upper Selwyn Hut, and that consultation has now come to a close. So we'll summarise those submissions and bring those to you in that meeting. Last year, we also had a public meeting at Arthur's Pass to talk about chlorination with those ratepayers, and we'll be summarising that consultation and bringing it to you at that same meeting as well. And the third part is looking at international best practice of non-chlorinated supplies around the world and comparing our schemes with those. So it's not necessarily telling us what we have to do to remain non-chlorinated, because that will be determined through the water safety plans and district health board requirements, which they haven't given us at this point. But we'll give an indication of what other places in the world have done to achieve that standard. And so we'll talk about that and what the costs are in relation to that work. So I'll now pass on to Elaine to talk about capital projects. So we're talking at the bottom of page 69.
Thank you. So there's just a few photos here of some of the capital works projects that are underway. We're in quite a substantial programme of works just now, so that would be nice for you to see what was actually happening. The first one is at Arthur's Pass. And then the photograph, you can see the new treatment work building and the new reservoir that have been put in place. And hopefully those reservoirs are blending in quite nicely to the background scenery. There was quite a lot of thought put into picking that colour. And then we've got figure 2 has the new building at Rakaya Huts. So that's a new treatment plant that's gone in there. And figure 3 then shows you a small snippet of some of the treatment plant that's going in. And that particular one is the UV plant at Claremont.
Perfect. So we're now moving across, there's no update on the regulator, but on page 71, there's a 3 waters review. And Murray Washington, were you wanting to talk to that?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Just going back onto the water regulator, they're obviously starting to staff that unit. And tomorrow we have the first meeting of one of the reference groups, which I'm a sector member on, which is on rural and small supplies, and that's particularly going to look at the non-council supplies and the ones that are going to have a big effort to get up to standard. And on the 3 waters review, I think the paper stands itself. It'll be really dependent on how the Merrill Forum looks on Friday in terms of scope of ongoing reviews.
Thank you. Before you move on to wastewater, Murray, I might just see if there's any questions on that potable water section. So Councillor Miller and Councillor Alexander.
I want to start on the water safety plans, if you don't mind. There was quite a media coverage of Christchurch City attempting to get their water safety plans for non-chlorinated water. Our water safety plans for non-chlorinated supply, I mean, Christchurch seem to be very confident they will enable, their water safety plans will enable non-chlorinated supply. How are you seeing ours?
So our plans are applying for non-chlorinated supplies. Our feedback we've received, and there's been great work done by the team, Elaine and her guys. So they'll come back saying they're very complete, very thorough, a real good high standard. There has been inklings of rumours or of talk about, it would be a lot easier if these schemes were chlorinated to pass the water safety plans, but our intention at this stage is to pass them without chlorination. If that's not possible, then we'll bring that back to council for consideration. Christchurch hasn't yet had their plans approved.
Should I carry on? Yeah. The new steel tank at Dunsandel, is that an issue with the quality of water going into the tank, or is it a fundamental problem with the tank itself creating high coliforms?
Yeah. It's an issue with the tank itself, in particular the roof of the tank.
So following on from that question, is it under warranty still? Because this cost shouldn't be our cost, should it?
Yeah, so there's been a design review of the tank, and so that's working through the process at the moment. I probably can't comment more than that, but it has been reviewed.
I think that probably could refer to our audit and risk committee, perhaps that one. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the water supply for rural townships. You've got a matrix there in your appendix. Just looking at it closely, particularly some of the Melbourne supplies, an alternate solution which we're already using in Springfield and Sheffield would be CPW water. Has that crossed your mind to feed it into the back of our treatment stations rather than maintaining?
Sorry, Grant, I'm just not sure that you're speaking on Central Plains water matters. Just might create a bit of a conflict for yourself.
Well, I'll declare a conflict if that's required, but I don't think there's a conflict here, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking a question about has he considered it. I don't think there's any conflict at all. But if they CEO rules are a conflict, I will declare it and step back.
It's good to acknowledge it, but you may carry on. Thanks.
Well, if there's a conflict, I acknowledge it, but I don't believe there is one.
Yeah, so we have a connection to CPW, or have ability to take water from CPW for the Sheffield water supply and also the Springfield water supply. I think that's a really great example of how council and CPW worked together in the past. There may be parts where we could join onto, but where the treatment plants are currently situated, there's no direct connection to CPW, but further down the scheme, we could potentially in the future put another treatment plant in there and feed those supplies. Yep.
And the last question is around land drainage committees. Just to give you some feedback that land drainage committees, well, the one particularly that I'm involved with, are increasingly concerned that the requirements under the Drainage Act that they're required to meet being made more difficult by environmental plantings and the ability to clean waterways. So I guess there's a bit of a challenge there, which I might pass on to you to follow up, but it is an issue.
Yep, so we can add that to the list of future points for discussions and point for this report. So we have plantings, to land drainage for that.
Councillor Alexander, and then Hassan and Bland.
Thank you. The questions I had noted were with respect to West Melton and Dunsandel with the temporary chlorination. Are you getting complaints from the community about that level of chlorination? Is there feedback? Are they noticing at this low level? And the second, you've kind of answered around the timetable for removal. You're still in the investigation phases, really on both of getting new tanks for West Melton and the Dunsandel. So you really don't have a timetable yet to remove for that removal?
So I'll talk about West Melton first. So with regards to West Melton, we're currently in the pricing phase of the tanks. So hopefully I'll have an update next month with regards to acceptance of that price and the time frame for moving forward with that one. In regards to complaints from West Melton particularly, there have complaints I know of have been minimal, and there was mainly at the start, but there hasn't been much since then. You might have more on that one, Murray.
My only comment about West Melton is that the reservoirs are really used during the peak of the summer to try and buffer the peak flows. And so in winter, when demand reduces, we use our online bores, mainly on the Western Downs side of the scheme. And so the reservoir water is not used as much. So there's not much chlorination water going in there. Not much, not really a good technical term, but there's a very limited flow from the reservoirs of chlorinated water into the scheme. So we wouldn't expect many complaints because not many people are drinking that water.
Yeah, that's correct. The volumes are relatively minimal in comparison to the whole scheme. And then Dunsandel, again, I'm not aware of many complaints that have come from Dunsandel. I'd have to check if there was an exact number and get back to you on that one. So I've got a meeting tomorrow about Dunsandel, and hopefully we'll get an update from there.
Are we open for a comment on 3.5 with water races? Or we're not here yet? Okay, thank you. I'll leave it to them.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Murray. Hey, I was just looking at this Rosington Drive, and I see that, and I wanted to talk to you about it, that we're removing tanks. And the questions that I would ask, I think that it may have already been touched on slightly, is what is wrong with those tanks? How much do we pay for them? What's the value of them? Can we get anything from them? And it just seems to me, what was the actual expected life of them?
It's probably to some extent a case of what was appropriate in the past is no longer appropriate now in the present. So the tanks haven't dramatically failed at West Melton. Lid designs have progressed over time, and so what we're reacting to now is very small counts of total coliforms, whereas in the past you may have had tens or hundreds of total coliforms, and you might get one count of E. coli. So we're now responding on a much shorter time frame. So that's probably my comment there. So the tanks haven't failed, and they haven't changed or deteriorated in condition. They've always been how they've been, but we are responding now a lot earlier to issues.
And the cost?
What the tanks would be. So there's 10 tanks, 2 banks of 5, and the plastic tanks were from the order of $5,000 to $10,000. There's some specialised fittings. We wanted larger connecting joints, and they would probably boost the tanks up to, I'm not sure, $8,000 to $10,000 each. So we're not talking about huge amounts of money, but it's roughly the water cost. Okay, so wastewater section 3.2 on page 71, and this is probably more of a topic just to whet your appetite, a precursor to what will come in the future. So Darfield and Kiwi Wastewater, we've obviously been consulting on that as part of this annual plan process, so I'm not going to prejudge where that ends up. But I just want to draw you to attention that we are looking at an alternative to the option of developing an on-site wastewater system in Darfield. And this is looking at the feasibility of connecting Darfield to the Rolleston Wastewater Treatment plants. So there's a little diagram here on the same page, but generally require a 26-kilometre long pipeline, so that is quite long, and one of the submitters mentioned travel time as a potential issue for that. But there's 2 basic options. One is running a pipe partially full, so a gravity flow from Darfield down, and another option would be looking at running a pipe full, so almost a pressurised pipe. So not necessarily pumped, because I think gravity will do the job for us, but the pipe will be running full under pressure. from that. So there's some merits in that, and there's also some disadvantages, but that will be brought through as part of the Starfield wastewater discussion as time goes on. And I think this will be something we'll bring up in the next long-term plan process. Over the page to page 72, and same sort of vein actually, Ellesmere Wastewater Treatment Plant. We're currently in the process of developing a concept design for the Ellesmere Treatment Plant upgrade, and that's to allow for growth. As an alternative to upgrading the treatment plant, we have also reviewed the option of conveying partially treated, which will be water that's gone through the ponds first, or raw water, so obviously bypassing the ponds and pumping that up to Pines as well. So this route would be approximately 21 kilometres long and likely to cross the Sound River at the bridge. There's potential to pick up other smaller wastewater systems along the way, including parks and reserves, public facilities, things like that. So we need to go through the process for those two options to see which one's the most cost effective and which one provides the most resilience and long-term solution. But I'm just drawing to attention that we are looking at that as a potential option. So the natural thing to think about then as well, if pumping everything to Pines, if that is a chosen option, then what's Pines going to do with all that wastewater? And so that's the third part under this comment here. The current Pines wastewater treatment plant is a modular system. We're going to build it as time goes through, so to meet demand as it occurs. And we're currently, this next accounting year, moving into Pines stage 4. There's 5 stages. Pines is originally designed for 60,000 population equivalent. So if you just had people, you could have 60,000 people discharging to that treatment plant. Obviously, you've got industrial areas which takes up some of that equivalent capacity. And part of the project we're looking at now is saying, well, what would be Pines 120? So if we had 120,000 people going to Pines, what would that look like? And how could that cater for growth? So we're trying to look out far enough. Do we have enough disposal land? We've got a lot, about 480 hectares of land that we're currently discharged to. And that land itself can probably take us up to around about 80,000 to 100,000 PE. Yeah. So we're looking pretty good for that, but let's just stretch ourselves. What does the future look like for Pines? And let's make sure we don't undersell ourselves. So this work's all occurring ahead of the long-term plan, and we'll bring that to council closer to that time. So wastewater, if we take questions on
Any
that.
questions on wastewater?
Yeah.
Yep, Councillor Heston and then Blanks.
Thank you. With regards to the wastewater treatment, are you looking with regards to the modular system of treating still at Darfield and Leaston prior to pumping with regards to the quality of the wastewater that would be received at the Pine site? Is that an option?
Yeah, it's certainly an option. With Ellesmere particularly, the oxidation ponds are there existing, and so the question is, do we utilise those? One of the benefits of the pond is we can buffer flows and we can send a continuous hydraulic load to the Pines treatment plant. So when we have a high demand in the morning and the evening, the pond can buffer that and we just carry on pumping a continuous discharge. There's also benefits that you can take out some of the organic matter, so you have better hydraulic capacity in your pipes or less sort of odour issues and bits and pieces like that. So definitely looking at that. Darfield, we don't have a treatment plant there at the moment, so we have to work out the cost benefit of building a plant there and piping it to Pines as opposed to just piping it. But all these things can be looked at, sure.
Yeah, Murray, I know that it's in the early stages and you're only looking at the options, and perhaps this question is premature, but it's certainly one that's going to be asked by probably 17 or 18,000 people. And you really do need to factor this into any equations that you're using. There is a benefit to Ellesmere and there's a benefit to Darfield in pumping it to the Pines. What's the benefit to the Eastern Selwyn sewerage community that have paid for it?
Yeah, so there obviously will be a cost. We have a development contribution model set up for Pines at the moment. So as growth occurs, developers pay their fair share for the building of that plant. If we add additional load, whether it be an industry or another community, then there should be a contribution from that as well. And that needs to be brought forward as part of the funding model, but there will be some costs that need to be incurred. And whether it's all of Selwyn or the communities that are discharging to it, that needs to be determined.
Yeah, thank you for looking to the long horizon. It's where we should be looking always, and particularly with wastewater plants. I just ask that you also, in that looking, talk to our people at Burnham. I know that they show intent to want to come to us, and they're looking at expanding what they're doing. They do have land there, which could also assist in disposal. So I wouldn't like to see that opportunity not taken.
Thank you. Councillor Reach.
Far out. Thanks for that, Murray. Just some clarification. So you said we're going to stage 4 at the moment. So, and in the report says ultimate capacity is 60,000 P equivalents. So what is stage 4 population equivalents at the moment?
So it's kind of a difficult question to answer because each stage upgrades different parts of the plant, which has different capacity. But just to give you an overall, I can answer that, is that we're running around about 35 to 40,000 P equivalent at the moment. So we're sort of heading towards, I suppose, 2/3 of our capacity. Pines 4 is another clarifier. And so that actually takes us all out to 60,000 P for that particular part of the plant, but there's other parts. For example, at the moment, we're upgrading the solid drying hall, which is another part.
Which is
That will take us to 60,000 for that part as well. Yeah. Other upgrades will be blower air capacity upgrades and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Reid.
I don't know whether I'll explore my feminine side, Sam, but anyway, thank you for the presentation and commend you on looking at options for Ellesmere Wastewater Treatment Plant. Obviously, there's issues there, and there was quite a large planned expenditure there to expand or improve that site, Murray, which would have been district-wide funded as the part of the district-wide fund, and I'm sure that in the calculations of whether it goes to Pines, that contribution will be included in the calculations as to who pays for what, because that money was going to be expended through the district-wide rate anyway. That there are the other benefits of other communities as part of the Ellesmere potential to pick up on the Ellesmere and the DCs from the expansion of those communities as well to help to pay for that.
I'll just add that, sorry, very quickly, Sam, is we are also looking at reviewing our climate change report on the impacts on 5 waters, and a big part of that is looking at groundwater levels, particularly around the Ellesmere treatment plant area, and what's the long-term life of that.
Yep. So stormwater to start off, the Leeston flood bypass. So I think last time the design of stage 3 had been complete, and here it was noted that we were still awaiting a price for the construction works. We now have that price, so that estimate is under review by the team here at SDC. And then stage 4, so that we're under negotiations with landowners around easements and access. So they have received the offer from council for their land, and the landowners are currently in the process of getting their own valuations complete. So that is still in process. Also, with regards to Leeston, Volkman's drain should be cleaned next month. Horata. So we're continuing with the work plan as agreed with the community board. The work on Hawkins Road drain has now been completed. We've also completed the physical works above the reserve. The remaining items in the work plan, including the Billy Road drainage, are currently in the process of being scoped and priced. So we're continuing through with that.
The last one on stormwater is a stormwater disposal upgrade. So we're working with our roading department to upgrade some of the soakage systems in Rolleston and Prebbleton and in Darfield. So that's just a quick summary for councillors of the road names and where those stormwater works are occurring. Any questions on stormwater before we move to land drainage?
Just one with regards to stormwater. Is this work that's needed with regards to the discharge consent that the basins will need to be renewed for every 5 years, or is this actually works to try and accommodate more hard surfacing that is developed within the local realised areas?
Yeah, so I suppose it's this particular work that I'm referring to here is renewal of soak holes that are currently existing. So it's the renewal of those assets. In terms of stormwater basins, we have got money this coming financial year to do more soil testing of those to see if there's any build-up of contaminants in that topsoil layer, and then they'll be refurbished if that is the case. But they've actually provided great treatment, and they don't seem to be accumulating metals as fast as we perhaps first thought. modern vehicles, you don't have oil leaks and things like that. So our infrastructure is lasting a lot longer than we expected, which is good. So land drainage, there's not much to say on that. It's just that the annual drain cleaning work is underway. Any other questions on land drainage? Water races. So I've been asked to talk about the Upper Ellesmere scheme, and that's why I've got this segment here. So the council owns and operates the Upper Ellesmere water race network. The water race starts from and is fed by the Glenroy Community Irrigation Limited pond, which I actually now refer to as Glenroy Irrigation. So following the development of CPW, we have had a lot more requests for race closures in the Upper Ellesmere area. That was the first year where CPW came through. And the reason for that, and we've talked about this before, is that farmers are going from dry land farming to more irrigated land and dairy farm work. And so stop water races are no longer required in that farming practice. They also get in the way of the centre pivots, which you have to bridge over, and you have to fence them as well from their farm management plan. So there's a driving force to shut water races for those sort of general reasons. Glenroy and the council are parties to the Upper Ellesmere Water Race Infrastructure Agreement. And so this agreement allowed council to gain access to their fish screens. And this is a historic document. To reciprocate to that, council has given Glenroy ability to take irrigation water down through our water race network to other farms in the area. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions were, can we shut the Upper Ellesmere water race? It's identified in our long-term plan. This is the last of the 2018 long-term plan to actively work towards shutting the Upper Ellesmere water race. And as staff, that is what we've been doing. But we need to enter into a new agreement with Glenroy to remove that requirement to provide access to the downstream races, because if they're closed, obviously we can't provide that access. So that's where we're working through at the moment. Is there any questions on that?
Just on the time frame, Murray, you sort of say at the end, negotiations are ongoing. What's your sense of where that's at and when we might get to a resolution?
So there was a nervous smile. So I suppose whenever you have two parties, there's always a mix of control about how timeframes are going. But our next steps will be to have a meeting with Glenroy, and also there's a number of individual or independent irrigators on that scheme. And so hopefully for the next 6 weeks, we'll be catching up with Glenroy and those independent irrigators to talk about what that future could look like. We have got a draft agreement that's been going backs and forwards between our legal teams. So I can't give you a deadline when we're going to resolve that, but it's our intention to resolve it as quickly as we can.
Great, thank you. And also just for the meeting, I've asked Murray to develop a calendar for the next 12 months to look at how water races can be looked at in depth, so that we can ask questions ahead of the long-term plan, so that the long-term plan is a conclusion of a process rather than just the first step in a process, and that will be reported back to maybe next month or the one after some water report here to council. Councillor Hassan.
Glenroy irrigation scheme and parties, are they linked through to CPW? Do they also gain access to Central Plains water irrigation, and are they using the water race system to distribute if they are joining, are they using the water race system to distribute CPW water throughout their farms?
So I don't know the answer to that question, but I can say that each party to the Glenroy agreement has consented water from the Kaya River, and that's what we work to. So I couldn't comment on that, sorry.
Councillor Lehman.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I just want to seek clarification if we're going to get that timeline through for LTP discussion, that we also have an understanding of the revenue from that scheme, the proposed closed area and the expenses of it, so that we can make an informed decision on where those two sit and how we would go about funding that going forward. I'm sure that will be part of it, Murray, but yeah, just for clarification in this meeting.
Great. Well, thank you, Murray and Elaine, for the great report and for the questions that it's helped us to have answered. It's great to have this coming through regularly for our community, just so that we can see the work that goes on. We rely on our water, and often we just see it when we flush a toilet or turn the tap on to brush our teeth or have a drink, and don't think about everything that goes on in the background. So thank you for that today. Councillor Lehman.
Yes, question for the meeting, really. Councillor Miller asked whether the discussion around the Dunsandel tanks would come to audit and risk. It's a question that was raised in this meeting. I just want to get clarification as to whether the answer comes back to this meeting or whether it goes third hand through our forum and comes back as reported from us at audit and risk.
I think there's a regular reporting structure here, and if the answer to that question can be brought back to this meeting, and if there's need for further investigation, we can do that through a different mechanism. But if next month there's the explanation that's required back in this report, Murray, then that would cover it here. Are you okay with that, Mr. Lemon?
I'm happy either way. I just wanted to get clarification.
Happy to be led by any other councillors' views, but the report's already on this agenda. Councillor Miller?
The reason I suggested it go to audit and risk is it's because there's a risk component to it. It's a water supplies, and you've got a supplier around procurement, which doesn't appear to have worked that well. So it depends on the depth that you go into it. And I guess that'd be for the water services team and the chairman of audit and risk to decide whether it warrants his attention, I guess, at the end of the day.
Shall we get the report back and see whether it warrants further investigation?
It's been moved and seconded that we receive this report. So all those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the public part of this meeting. The resolution to exclude the public. Move Councillor Gallagher and Reid. All those in favour say aye. Declare it carried. And we'll just adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes to allow our visitors to leave and start again at 2:10.